No sooner were those proclamations made by both adventuring parties, did the whole room's mood suddenly shift. Doors to either wings of the central hall were shut, and the entrance to the guild itself was cordoned off not long after. Young and familiar faces belonging to the apprentice trainees flooded out one by one, as all stood at attention at the far reaches of the room, though the quality of their would-be parade rest dances would have sent Auntie Ran into a fiery fit. What remained of the uproarious and chaotic vibe of the place quickly fizzled out, as competing conversations mellowed out into an eerie silence, the attention of an entire room quickly landing on the two parties. Eyeballs and eye stalks alike quickly fixated on the quest listing in each party leader's hands. Following which, the two leaders promptly took to what I now realized weren't actually weirdly shaped barstool fixtures, but podiums. Remarkably short and stumpy podiums, with little in the way of presence, like those found in the academy, but podiums all the same. This disadvantage in height, though, was unconventionally rectified by the crowd, as everyone present began taking their seats, with those unfortunate enough to lose this impromptu game of musical chairs consigned to sitting on the floor. A short clattering of weapons and armor later, and the intended effect was obvious, at least for the elf. The dwarf still remained woefully too short for the podium, with only his dented and horned helmet barely poking above a few of the taller, seated adventurers. A glare was quickly exchanged between the two leaders as a result, although something told me that there was much more going on beneath the surface to warrant that sharp and sudden of an ire-filled glare. An assumption that began panning out as they both attempted to speak at about the same time. "The party of..." they both began, before stopping prematurely. It didn't take too long for the guild commander to quickly step in, however, stopping this stalemate in its inception with a quick nod directed towards the pay-to-win elf, much to the dwarf's annoyance. "The great and bountiful party of Elisir's illustrious quest-seers humbly accepts the quest listing submitted by the Lord Mayor of Elisir for the tracking, reporting, and optional hunting of the werebeast of the Elisir forests, last heard terrorizing the warehouse prior to its destruction," the gold-haired elf began, his radiant armor practically blinding anyone looking in his general direction. "The werebeast? Didn't I bind it to the tree stump before? Oh. Lord Lartier was supposed to pass that intel on to the adventurers. So given he'd died before telling anyone where it was, the thing probably had enough time, or help, to escape. As is guild tradition, the great and bountiful party of Elisir's illustrious quest-seers is open to any who wish to compete for the right to this quest, or any who wish to join as adjuncts to our party." The man stopped, awaiting whatever response might come. A few seconds of silence later, and a hand was raised. Then another, and another. Soon, about half of the room had their left arms raised. Left or right probably corresponds to whether or not they want to join or protest the quest rights then, I quickly thought to myself. "Splendid," the elf beamed out, manufacturing a grin that felt so eerily fake, almost plastic in a way that I couldn't pin down. "However, I only need a quarter of you for this quest." He shifted his tone abruptly, causing some arms to waver, if only slightly. Following which, the elf began raising his arm, and without once shifting that faux positivity of his voice, he began pointing towards each party leader in the crowd. You, and you," he began, going for about 10 more people before finally arriving at an unexpected conclusion. "All of you will not be joining us. The rest of you may follow us to the private function room." The emotional whiplash was so sudden that even I was barely able to process it, as literally a dozen parties were left in the dust of their compatriots, all of whom began marching up the grand staircase, following the pay-to-win elf's lead, some much more reluctantly than others. This wasn't Academy Noble dynamics at all, or at least not all of it was, as I couldn't help but to notice the adventurer Venerian casting a fiery and contemptuous glare at his kobold counterpart, the smaller being practically skirting down into her oversized chestplate like a turtle ducking its head into its shell. There was clearly a pecking order here, one that the dwarf seemed to be painfully aware of as he began his own spiel as soon as the pay-to-win elf left earshot. Sims Troubleshooters humbly accepts the quest listing submitted by the Office of the Guildmaster for the scouting and reporting of the whereabouts of the Amethyst Dragon. Last seen leaving the scene of the warehouse explosion. The man began through a tired mumble, looking around with half-lidded eyes at the disinterested crowd. As is guild tradition, Sims Troubleshooters is open to any who wish to compete for the right to this quest, but not for anyone who wishes to join as adjuncts to our party. The latter part proved to be interesting, as reactions amongst the crowd were mixed between quiet indifference or outright dismissiveness. Yeah, of course he'd want to keep it a closed quest. Cheap bastard wants to keep all that gold for himself. No surprise, none at all. Sim needs every coin he can get. The poor bloke's drowning in debt. I doubt the 5,000 gold is going to put a dent in that, sadly. The chatter amongst the crowd was reasonably loud, or at least loud enough that Sim decided to address it directly, as he seemed to have little in the way of patience for would-be gossipers. Ahem. If anyone at all wishes to compete for the right to this quest, now is the time to speak with the backing of fists and steel, he cautioned, bringing the whispers to an abrupt halt, making an effort to meet each and every one of the adventurers' eyes with an unamused expression. I didn't think so. Guild Commander, may I ask permission to proceed to deliberations? He turned towards the commander in question, who nodded approvingly. Nexus, the Crown Herald town of Elasir, Ambassadorial District. The Adventurers Guild Hall of Elasir. Guild Master's Office. Local time 17:22 hours. Emma. No, Eleanor proclaimed, with a degree of dismissive severity that only a competitive noble could master, making an effort not to meet any one of the party members' eyes. But Eleanor, you haven't even allowed them to introduce themselves. I've seen enough, Cadet Emma Booker, he addressed me tersely, though with a clear degree more respect compared to how he addressed these adventurers. We are not settling for a ragtag troop of third-rate adventurers, not especially when they will invariably be representing our interests. If I may, my lord. You may not, adventurer, Eleanor snapped harshly, causing the dwarf's brow to twitch in frustration. The Venerian promptly turned towards the guildmaster, who sat there quietly, his thin lines for eyes somehow telegraphing a certain sense of frustration, shared amongst everyone in the group. Guildmaster, I demand that a new adventuring party be dispatched post-haste. However, before the guildmaster could even respond, it was Thalman who threw his hat into the ring, approaching the ragtag group with a growl. Name, specialties, and ratings, the mercenary prince demanded, completely sidestepping Eleanor's complaints. Yes, mercenary prince, they all spoke in unison, bowing deeply. My name is Duran Moven. Adventuring name, The Wall. The tired-looking, somewhat emaciated-looking brown bear spoke first. Specialty, General Brawler and Forest Scout. Rating, Griffin class. Eleanor let out a loud and dismissive puff at that. My name is Fulk Van Scar. Adventuring name, Winged Dread. The surprisingly friendly bat humanoid of the group spoke up next, reaching for his loot as he maintained a constant and unbothered smile. I dabble in many specialties, Sky Scout, Night Scout, and aerial combat being my most noteworthy, with a little sprinkling of bardic inclinations into the mix, he added cheekily, strumming his out-of-tune lute in the process. You can expect nothing less from that of a Griffin class like myself. The Venerian didn't let up, rolling his eyes now, as the poor kobold was now practically left increasingly nervous for her introduction. My name, Kintor Gonthier, the Skitterer. Specialty, Rogue and Scavenger. Rating, Greater Phoenix class. Eleanor was about ready to give up at this point, the deluxe kobold reaching for a complimentary cupcake from a tower of baked goods, just as the dwarf party leader stepped up to the plate. "My name is Party Leader Sim the Honeydew. Frontliner Battle Mage, Wyvern class." It was that latter proclamation that garnered some reaction from Eleanor, though admittedly not as much as Thalmin, as the mercenary prince took extra time to evaluate the dwarf from tip to toe. "Alert! Localized surge of mana radiation detected. 550% above background radiation levels," before outright breaking into a frenzied dash towards the man. A flash of light was all I saw as multiple mana radiations hit me, the EV taking over the suit's reflexive defensive systems as a result. However, it was clear that I was the last person who'd need defending, as the light and subsequent smoke subsided to reveal the tip of Thalmin's collapsible sword, poised a mere inch from the dwarf's eyeball. The blade was barely held at bay by the dwarf's iron grip on its base. This standoff was quickly broken by another burst of mana radiation. "Alert! Localized surge of mana radiation detected. 570% above background radiation levels." Skrrr! One which resulted in Thalmin being knocked back about a foot away from that knife-edge confrontation. Both parties at this point held their respective weapons poised and ready, in a battle-ready stance. Though, strangely, or rather fortunately, neither side seemed to take the initiative. As an upward quirk of Thalmin's lip and a subsequent light smile from the dwarf was all it took for the pair to disarm, both parties sheathing their weapons just moments following that death-defying stunt. "Apparel and appearances may often proclaim the noble courtier," Thalmin began, craning his head towards the Venerian who'd since dropped the complimentary cupcake from his hands. "But in the realm of the adventurer, it is experience and action that determines his fate," the prince concluded, before turning back towards the dwarf with a reassuring smile. "Wyvern class, huh?" "Yes, mercenary prince," the dwarf nodded, bowing once again in respect. "That was barely Griffin class, if you ask me," the Lupinor rebutted, garnering a look of incredulous concern from the dwarf, before once again being diffused by the prince's confident chuckle. "But that's only because a Wyvern class's trial by fire would most certainly lead to the destruction of this room, and then some," the prince quickly added with a toothy grin, craning his head towards the guildmaster whose forehead, I could swear, had beads of nervous sweat. "I assume you have credible records of the man and his compatriot self-proclaimed adventuring classes?" "Yes, mercenary prince," the blue, gelatinous blob replied, manifesting the requested documents for Thalmin through his translucent form. A quick shuffling of paper later was all that was needed to double-check these claims, as Thalmin turned towards me with a confident look. "Whilst not Wyvern class in a traditional sense, given only one of 4 is actually confirmed to be Wyvern class, it is my judgment that this adventuring party will make do, Emma." A groan from Eleanor made it clear his refusal to budge on the matter. "We were promised a Wyvern class party, not a second-rate stand-in," he grumbled. "Didn't you say they were third-rate, Eleanor?" I shot back, attempting to undermine his constant whining by attacking him where it should hurt, his own inconsistencies. "Yes, I did. However, Prince Havenbrock's little stunt elevated them from third to second in my eyes," he answered, with a flighty shrug, causing me to groan silently in frustration, as I instead chose to focus my efforts on the group. "Are you sure you folk are up to the challenge?" I asked the group, not just its leader, directly. This led to a wide array of reactions, from the kobold's skittish nervousness, to the bat's cocksure confidence, and finally to the dwarf's own look of stoic steadfastness. "Half of our group's specialties lie in scouting and tracking. One from the skies," he pointed at the bat, who bowed with a draping of his arm wing in my direction, "and another from the dirt." He gestured towards the kobold. "If you'll excuse my brazenness, my lady, I say we're more than capable of accomplishing this simple tracker report quest. And this is not an attempt at undermining other adventuring parties, but I doubt you'll find any other takers for such a quest in the time limit provided." I gave each and every one of the party members a good glance once again, before reaching out my hands towards Thalmin, the Wolf Prince handing me the group's documents wordlessly. My eyes widened as I saw what amounted to the dwarf's service record, and in that moment I was practically sold. "You're hired. I proclaimed, once more garnering a groan from the Venerian. Moreover, I'm willing to add a bit of a clause to sweeten the deal. For every day you shave off from the predetermined time limit, I'll reward you with a bonus of 50 gold. The dwarf's eyes lit up at this, as that little incentive clearly caught his attention. However, Eleanor chimed in, for every day you delay past that limit, 50 gold shall be deducted from your pay. We are not agreeing to that, Eleanor. We are amenable to these clauses, the dwarf responded with a nod, taking me completely by surprise. For we are confident we shall accomplish this quest at the earliest, and then some. He finally smiled for the first time throughout this entire interaction, reaching out a hand towards me. I took a moment to side-eye Eleanor, to which he simply shrugged, before kneeling down to firmly grasp the man's hand. It's a deal then. Nexus. The Crown Herald Town of Elasir. Ambassadorial District. The Adventurers Guild Hall of Elasir. Grand Hall. Local time 1752 hours. Emma. We left the adventuring party and the guildmaster to discuss the finer details of vehicle acquisition. We also left the guildmaster's room 3,000 gold coins lighter than when we came in. That fact hit me like a sack of bricks, or 10 whole bim-bims for reference. The lack of a tangible safety net and the finite nature of my funds here was starting to rattle my nerves. But that was probably by design, intentionally set up by the Nexus in order to stack yet more cards against the new Roma candidates. It wouldn't be outside their MO after all. From forcing a candidate to preemptively study High Nexian, to expecting them to immediately grapple with cultural norms and expecting decorum on the fly, adding financial strains on the candidate didn't seem too far out from the realm of possibility. It was devious and disgusting, but it was definitely something that fit their playbook. Especially if they got into tangible and intangible debt with whoever they happened to bump into. That train of thought continued until we finally made our way back into the main hall, which now seemed to be surprisingly devoid of people. So, that's it then? Anything else on the list, Thacia? I turned to the princess, who responded with a shake of her head. Everything that is required of us has been accomplished, Emma. School supply trip. Status: completed. Following that, I quickly turned towards the Evie, as it was time to start going through my own list of objectives. Evie, bring up the quest log. A short, pending notification soon followed, as I imagined the Evie to be reasonably annoyed at my continued assault on proper lingo. Current mission objectives as indicated by Mission Commander. A. Locate and secure the AMD-002B. Yeah, the Amethyst Dragon Quest, and the subsequent rebuilding of the ECS. Mark the first as pending and Objective B is dependent on A, I responded, cutting the Evie off. Acknowledged. List continues. C. Resume library questline with Eleanor Valaria by retrieving the original copy of Item of Interest, Maltori's notebook. Yeah, that's when school starts back up after the house-choosing ceremony tomorrow. Acknowledged. List continues. D. Follow up on Reela's whereabouts and status following the explosion. I paused at that, my heart sinking right into my gut as I forced the Evie to pause the list of objectives for the time being. Let's get on that right away, I commanded, eliciting an affirmative beep from the Evie, as the quest in question faded away into the backdrop at the upper right-hand corner of my HUD. Right, guys, I'm going to need to... I turned back towards the gang, only to find Eleanor missing. A quick look around later, and I quickly spotted him approaching the illustrious pay-to-win party. Several feelings began popping up one after the other, as I could only watch in anticipation for what shenanigans the Venerian was about to get into next. Oh, do my eyes deceive me? Or am I in the good company and graces of a fellow upper ringer? He announced out of nowhere, taking a few short footfalls towards the fancifully armoured blue and turquoise Venerian. The adventurer in question, however, refused to respond at first, his gaze only momentarily meeting Eleanor's. Though that was all it took for him to become ensnared in the latter's trap. While I may be one to forget faces, I never forget a fellow Venerian's eyes, Eleanor doubled down, eliciting nothing but a taciturn reaction from the man. "Why, if it isn't the audacious and bold Lord Eleanor Valaria," the adventurer finally grumbled out, forced to move a few steps towards Eleanor, if only to reluctantly engage in this unsolicited interaction. "I see you remember me, Lord Milias Tacten," Eleanor responded, with a hand resting on his maw. "Or what was it now? I'm never one for these silly little placeholder names commoners dress themselves up in." The turquoise and blue Venerian sighed once more, his eyes remaining completely unfazed, yet entirely annoyed. "It's Milius the Resplendent," he muttered out, causing... Why is this guy such an arsehole? He muttered out, quickly causing Eleanor to stifle a laugh. "Ah, how could I have forgotten such an illustrious name? Quite befitting of your group's chosen aesthetics." Eleanor beamed. "Is there anything I can help you with, Lord Valaria?" "Oh, straight to business nowadays, are we? My, the adventuring world truly has changed you, Lord Tacten. Or is it Milius now? Perhaps just the Resplendent?" The adventurer Venerian chose the wise response, however, giving Eleanor the silent treatment, as several members of his group shuffled awkwardly in place, as if trapped in a dialogue screen they all desperately wanted out of, but due to expectant decorum, simply couldn't. "In any case, how are you faring following your chosen departure?" Eleanor pushed forward, in spite of all social indicators telling him not to. "I believe I can ask the same of you, Lord Valaria." Milius shot back, using a tactic as old as time, the Onu reverse card, as it were. Why? Can't you tell?" He gestured towards himself, before craning his neck towards Thacia, Thamin, and myself. All eyes were then trained on us, which for the first time gave me genuine embarrassment in the midst of a crowd, as this was attention of the unwanted variety. "This is your peer group, I'm assuming?" Milius took the bait. "All adjacent realmers, I see." He cocked his head, garnering a slight self-satisfied chuckle of excitement from Eleanor. Indeed. So incredibly observant as always, my dear fellow." "And I'm assuming you're the peer group leader, the Nexian amidst adjacents?" The adventurer sighed out, prompting me to finally step in as I politely tapped Eleanor on the shoulder. "Eleanor, we have other matters to attend to." "Oh, please. You've had your time in the sun today, Cadet Emma Booker." He corrected himself, in a way I genuinely wasn't expecting. "I would wish for some time to revel in my own spotlight, as it were," he quickly added, in a way that straddled the line between a request and an ultimatum. I wanted to intervene, to burst his bubble right away. However, given my lack of background knowledge on the pair's history, I decided it was best to leave this particular bit of drama to Eleanor's discretion. If anything, he might just reap what he sowed here. With a shrug and a nod, I disengaged from that interaction, taking Thacia and Thamin along with me as we moved towards the exit. "How much time do we have left before the town's curfew hours, Thacia?" "Approximately 2 hours or so," the princess replied tactfully. "Why?" "I'm assuming she wants to arrange dinner plans or some such, princess," Thamin added in with a cheeky chuckle, one that I unfortunately diffused as I began laying down my plans for the rest of the evening. "While that honestly sounds great, I'm afraid there's another quest line I have to pick up. It's about Rila." "Who?" Thamin shot back, with a cock of his head. "The apprentice elf I was forced to leave in town," I clarified. "You want to learn of her fate, I imagine?" Thamin inquired. "I want to make sure she's okay and taken care of is all. That was the promise I made with the professors, so I expect her to be resting up in some clinic or hospital in town." "We can check with the healing center," Thacia quickly chimed in. "It's only a few minutes' walk from here." "Sounds like a plan." I paused as I quickly rummaged through one of my pouches, pulling out an artifact that both Thacia and Thamin were immediately drawn to. "A chime of consonance," Thamin surmised. "I'm assuming that this belongs to the elf?" "Yup, I was intending to use this to help improve our chances of finding her, or at least ensure that there's, a a plan B of tracking her down myself if the healing staff don't feel like helping. So with that said, do you guys have any pointers on how best to use it, or... It's a simple artifice, Emma, Thacia began, extending her talons expectantly, as I dropped the leather and pearl bracelet onto her palm. A rather low-quality item, I might add. However... Thacia paused, right before a surge of mana radiation hit us. Alert! Localized surge of mana radiation detected. 210% above background radiation levels. It should still work as expected. Simply put, it acts much in a similar manner to your dowsing rod. This artifice will ring the closer it gets to its paired chime, though unlike more sophisticated chimes of consonants, this particular artifice lacks anything other than that function. That's good enough for me, I acknowledged. What's the range on this thing, then? From my appraisal, you should hear a steady thrumming of chimes within a modest distance, say about spanning as wide as our dormitory. Gotcha, I nodded with a sigh, as we moved towards the Guildhall's entrance. I was hoping for something with a bit more kick to it, but I guess that's better than nothing. It was about then that I noticed a coat rack next to one of the service doors near the front of the Grand Hall. And a light bulb moment hit me. I quickly turned around, attempting to find the guild commander, only to be met with the satyr boy from before. Hey, kid, quick question. Do you have a lost and found closet for coats and cloaks? This question clearly caught the boy by surprise, as it took him a few moments to respond. Yes, my lady. Alright. Do you think anyone would mind me grabbing a cloak from there? That question prompted the boy to cock his head before shaking it. Not if you take one of the old ones that's been there for years, he responded frankly. Excellent, I beamed out, grabbing one of the dusty cloaks before stuffing it in one of my many shopping bags. Don't worry, I'm sure I'll be returning it sooner rather than later. Nexus. The Crown Herald town of Elasir. Ambassadorial District. His Eternal Light Healing Center. Local time, 1830 hours. Emma. Well, that settles it then. Looks like I won't be returning this cloak anytime soon. I spoke with a frustrated huff, taking long stompy strides down from the white stone tiled slopes of the Ambassadorial District's healing center. I pulled out the borrowed cloak from one of my bags just as we rounded the corner away from the building, swapping it with Mythos's custom-tailored cloak. This is probably cutting it a bit tight, but I gotta go check on the healing centers outside of the Ambassadorial District. Is that why you're swapping outfits, Emma? Thurman inquired gruffly. Yeah, I don't imagine dressing up in a super fancy cape is going to do me any favors in the suspicion department. The armor itself is quite conspicuous, Emma, but given the option between cape, cloak and bare metal, I'd say the cloak is a good call, Thurman offered, as we made our way out of the fancy healing center and towards the wall. One that clearly separated this gated district from what was working up to be a louder, more energetic part of town, if the Eevee's long-range acoustics are anything to go by. You guys don't have to follow me, by the way. This really isn't your fight. I can handle this on my own. Trust me, I offered, garnering 2 looks of mutual concern. Thacia stepped up first, handing me a small stack of gold coins, taking me by surprise until I remembered just where my winnings currently were. Just make sure you don't lose your school papers, Emma. Otherwise, you may find most of your night taken up by busybodies, delaying your ascent back to the academy, Thacia cautioned, with an audible degree of worry. To which I could only respond with a reassuring smile, one obscured by the helmet, but conveyed by my voice all the same. Thanks for the loan. And don't worry, Thacia. I'll be back before you know it. With a few goodbyes and a confident shoulder pat from Thalman, I promptly made my way past a rather nondescript gate, expecting some level of resistance but finding none at all. From there, I found myself figuratively teleported to an entirely different world. As sights, sounds, and what I could only imagine would have been smells without the helmet, assaulted my senses. No longer was I walking within a seemingly endless maze of pristine white and marble, but instead a veritable kaleidoscope of shades and colours. From the grey, black and brown cobblestone streets, to the mishmashed facades of townhouses that seem to be built with little in the way of uniform planning, ranging from gaudy facsimiles of Baroque architecture all the way down to dilapidated storefronts with questionable support struts, holding signs promising cheap goods and affordable rent rates available within. The whole place radiated a lived-in fantastical energy, one that was undeniably more down-to-earth, as even the sheer number of pedestrians gave it lively buzz that outshone anything found within the white and gilded noble enclave. All of this was rounded out by the appearance of horse-drawn carts, as I was brought right back down to earth with an unrepentant splash of murky brown puddle water slamming face first onto me, soaking the already dusty and moth-eaten cloak. "Evie, why didn't you move me out of the way?" "Thread threshold not within overriding parameters, Cadet Booker. If you wish to adjust current values, please specify." "Ugh, forget it," I sighed, suddenly thanking my helmet now for masking any and all smells from the outside world. "Right, let's move."